Hi, my name is Paul, and I talk a lot about perception and ancient mysteries. And today I'm going to continue my conversation about esoteric science. And before anybody wants to ask about my so-called credentials, I've practiced meditation since my early 20s, and in addition, I've read a lot of books and listened to a lot of teachers about consciousness and meditation, and read a lot of the ancient scriptures and so on. I'll talk about this particular book here in a bit. But I talk about an esoteric way of looking at the objective science that people talk about science. Okay, well, science is absolute. Science is they know things. Well, let's think about that word a little bit for a minute, because essentially, a science, anything to be repeatable. Let's say, for example, you want to build a bridge. There has to be some kind of a understanding of the weight and ratio and all that kind of stuff, so you can make something happen. So, a science, when applied, can create something. It can, whether it's a building or an invention of some kind. If you follow certain rules of the universe and that we know and understand, that we can create objects and different kind of devices that manipulate the energy of. So that's really essentially science. It's a very practical thing. So what happens today is, around the middle of I think it was about 500 years ago or so, we had the Renaissance. There was a period of really dark times on the earth, and I think it was like the 1200s. There was like people were separated, and it was really primitive, and not a lot of science and invention was going on then. And at one point in human history, they started to get a little more settled, and there was a lot of happening in Italy and Europe, and actually unknown to many people in the modern Western world. There's been science in India and Egypt for thousands of years, so there's a different kind of application and understanding of what makes practical. So again, a real science is practical, and it can be applied, and you can have some results. So predictable results. Now, the ancient teachers that I have listened to, and some of them just by ancient books and things like that, but they're modern teachers and yogis and so on, who have an understanding of consciousness in their own deep experience. And some of them may or may not have much of a knowledge of modern science, such as electronics and so on. But there are certain basic principles that the ancient teachers taught us and left records, for example, in architecture, by creating something like a cathedral or a pyramid. And you just have to look at that thing and say, well, whoever built that thing, whoever they were, they were pretty damn smart. And the more you look into them, how the details of the construction and the precision and so on, you realize, man, these guys, I don't know what they knew, but whatever it was, this is what they made. It must have been an esoteric science. So, getting back to the whole science, the esoteric and ancient teachings and the yogis and so on, they basically say you cannot separate consciousness from the creation, because essentially when you go into that infinite deep space and through practical experience and through meditation and so on, you understand that at some point that all the threads meet in one place. That's the ultimate consciousness, that there is a root consciousness and a root beingness and a root expression in whatever the cosmos is. It's vast. Okay, we don't even know how many universes they may or not be, but whatever. There's at least the one that we're in, and we can see it's pretty damn big. So whatever it is, however big it is, however it got here, our own little understanding in our short life, we have to get some serious contemplation, because if we're going to really grasp what's really going on, because there's a lot of confusion. So the ancients started talking about explore your own awareness, because by exploring your own awareness, you can explore the cosmos and so on. So one of the most profound statements I've ever found, made by a man who revered teacher, his name is Thoth, Thoth, I believe it was Egypt, and they were different kind of Hermes, I guess, was the Greek term for it. But the emerald tablets, if you ever read them and you go, wow, I don't know who that guy was, but whatever he was, somehow he had a profound understanding of this existence. And he said basically that he had let go basically, and apparently he had lived a long time, and he had left his body or into the state of consciousness of primordial essence, and over the period of time, realized that this human form that we all have, with the pineal gland, endocrine system, and all the other things that we have in this being, this body, was able to make a link between their awareness, their conscious awareness right here on the physical plane, doing all the things we do, and some kind of a deep, awesome, infinite consciousness that pervades everything, and realizing, well, all is one. So he made this one statement that says, as above, so below. If you look at that statement and say, wow, that's like, okay, fractals, okay, infinite self-reproduction. Self-replication is a beautiful basic factor of whatever this existence is, the life, the universe, whatever it is. It uses self-replication, cell division, DNA. There's so many examples of it, like seeds. Self-replication is a basic underlying factor of basically whatever we see out there in the whole universe. Certain principles apply, you see. So now, to understand the cosmos in a scientific sense, it's so vast. So let's start with something really simple. Scientists have shown that there's frequency. Okay, you can see the waves in a pond and whatever, but there's frequency and waves. Now, as we got advanced in science, we found out that there's electronic frequencies and light frequencies and sound frequencies and so on. And basically, a great man like Tesla said, well, the whole thing is frequency. Every single thing is frequency. The cell divides on frequency, the DNA operates on frequency, our brain operates on frequency, the whole solar system operates on a frequency. So frequency goes from basically 0 cycles a second, or 1 cycle for every billion seconds, or one. I mean, it's like the ultra low cycles. Ultimately, there is a cycle, because if you get to the ground plane of the universe, there has to be what they call the cosmic. It's just like so tiny. It's just basically just a pool of cosmic energy that we can't even conceive of. And from that dark, deep, completely concentrated, dense, whatever it is, we could try to describe it, the cosmic matter, the dark matter, whatever. From that place arises everything in existence, and including us, and then it all goes back into the same place. So there's certain elements of simplicity. Well, okay, let's talk about the spectrum. Okay, our eyes see in a certain spectrum, and our ears hear in a certain spectrum, and all the different senses that we have that relate. Now, what the ancient teachers say, that you cannot separate the consciousness of your own existence from what you observe. So basically, your own existence arises from the very source. Your awareness, your self-identity, arises from the same exact source of the thing that you're observing. So, in order to perceive accurately, then we have to be in that neutral state, so that you're not trying to separate what you observe from your. It's a very difficult process, and the techniques and so on. So, teachers taught that you just reflect on things, and you go inside, and you get to contemplation where the mind stops, and the reaction to things, perceived thoughts, and thoughts, all those things stop. And then you get to a ground plane of awareness where everything basically is one dimension and non-local and non-time space. So now, with that introduction to consciousness as an aspect of this creation, and we have to understand that before we get into esoteric science. Now, there are principles in this underlying creation that have to do with numbers and ratios and so on. And by contemplation and observation, ancient teachers have left down thousands of years testimony to these basic principles of color has a frequency and a sound, and light has a frequency, and light is related to sound, and sound's related to light, and all these things are related because there's one huge spectrum of the universe that you go from zero frequency to God knows infinite frequencies. In our little band of perception, the good news is that our physical senses have certain capacities and they have their physical limits, but the ancients taught that interior, there's inner sound, inner smell, inner taste, inner feeling, and inner awareness on the subtle planes that have a relation to as within, so without, as above, so below, that there is a self-similarity and a fractionality, or whatever you call it, metaphysical relationship through geometric and frequency relationships from the top down to the bottom, from the zero frequency all the way up and back. So if we understand that principles, and that within that band, our physical awareness in this particular life has a certain frequency range of our physical senses. But in addition to that, the energy of our body, the collective nature of our body, and the frequencies and the sound, our body is emanating energy and heat as it goes along, okay? For example, if you imagine if you had like a cosmic radar, and you had a radar wherever you go, you have this technology that you can see, infrared, and you can see things in the dark and so on. So imagine if there's a part of your own awareness that is already, it's in the infrared as well. It's in the ultraviolet as well. There's a part of our awareness, because we're a complete being that's integrated into this earth and the earth frequencies and the environment and electrical frequencies around us. We are beings integrated into that, and therefore our own perception can link to all those subtle things if we practice some techniques. And first, basically, the understanding is, first, if the door is open to understanding that we can link on a subtle level to the subtle things that are going on in our existence. And we're not just limited to the physical senses. See, there's a lot of misapprehension. Like people say, well, if I have really a so-called cosmic experience, then I'm going to be like, oh my God, like I won't be able to walk around, I won't be able to do anything, and I'll be in like a trance state or something. But the main goal of being a human being is to have like a synthesis of our existence and awareness, so that as we walk around and do all our nature things we got to do, mop the toilet or whatever, we also have a sense of the divine and the infinite, and our cosmic connection through within to the rest of our existence, besides that cleaning the bathroom or whatever. So that's a very important point, is that the consciousness, our own awareness, is integrated and linked into the rest of existence. So therefore, that's why we can have all those, we download information. People talk about, like, I downloaded something. Well, it's always there. See, it's always there for everybody, but it's a technology of our own. The teachers that are out there, I won't mention them, but they're people who teach different ways that you can practice and meditate and experience and enhance your perception. Now, that being the basis of what I've been saying here, in esoteric science, I want to explore this particular book here. Now, this book here called the Treatise of Cosmic Fire. I read this book a long, long time ago, and I reference it now and then, and it's really fat and has all these things. But the introduction, it was written basically under inspiration from what they call a Mahatma or a yogi or someone who had just dedicated their whole life, or maybe even lifetimes, to this inner practice that have been described for many sages. And he basically was saying is there's one boundless, immutable principle. There's the oneness. You see, you start with the one. We can all understand, in a sense, anything that has a synthesis. Imagine a sphere or a circle. There's a certain completion and totality that we can all conceive of. You see, just there's a symbolic ratio from top to bottom. Like, okay, the whole universe, but there's a whole plate full of berries or something, and then beyond that, there's like smaller and smaller and smaller. There's a whole atom, and then, it goes down. So basically from the top to the bottom, there's a certain integration and wholeness to the synthesis of everything. And that's what these ancient teachers say. Now, he says that the unmanifest universe is contained within this absolute reality and is a conditioned symbol of it. The manifested universe. So, the manifested is, in other words, a light may cast a shadow. Whatever is manifest is basically, essentially, a shadow of that unmanifested ultimate reality of which nothing can be said. I mean, you just draw drops and you can't really say much about it. The name that can't be spoken, the unspeakable name of God, the essence of all, at some point, our human comprehension has to just stop and say, well, I've got my limits here. So he says that this has several principles that this manifested universe has. The first cosmic logos, which is impersonal and unmanifested, the precursor of the manifested. There's something that precedes, something that's essential that precedes a manifestation. So you might have a thought or a design precedes what you produce. There's a certain cosmic intelligence that's innate into the whole system that makes and allows and enables consciousness in every single atom and being from top to bottom. And this particular essence has several principles. The spirit, matter, and life, the spirit of the universe, is the second cosmic logos. And the third cosmic logos is cosmic ideation, the universal world soul. I've read this book, and you have to think about this stuff for a long time, but what I got out of it was essentially there's something unmanifest that we can't even conceive of. Like you might even call it the zero. The zero. There's infinite, and then something happens, and then you take a circle, and you divide a line through it, and it becomes two. So at some point, that second principle was the beginning of manifestation. And it all goes above, as above, so below, so that even like in a cell division, there's one cell, and at some point it vibrates in a certain way, or it responds to certain frequencies in the environment or whatever, and then or if it's its own nature, and then it splits. So in the sense that this same principle applies on a very, very, it's top to bottom. See, there's so many examples of that splitting atom or the splitting egg or whatever. It's just so many different examples throughout cosmos because it's an essential principle of the nature of this thing that we live in, this existence. There's something underlying something, and then some activity happens, and then it splits, and then from then there's a third principle, which might be, he calls ideation. So there's something formless without identity and without form and shape, and then there's some division that happens, and then some activity, and then something with shape. The shape, thoughts, ideas, because every time we have to make any kind of shape, any kind of design, you have to have it in your mind first. You have to think in your mind. So apparently the divine cosmos, the infinite, has these principles, and they're embedded from top to bottom that creates how it creates everything. Everything sophisticated that we see is created from basically simple elements. It's like the cosmic Lego, I call it. Like, well, the Lego has only a certain limited number of parts, so they keep making more. But in the cosmic, they use spheres, they use circles, the tree of life, the interplay, the various cosmic solids integrate into a sphere. They can all be folded into a sphere and relate to each other. So nature has this tremendous and fantastic way of integrating everything from top to bottom without any, it's almost like a seamless thing, see, growing. And this is the cosmos. And scientists today, we try to figure out what's going on. We analyze things, and we become more enlightened about the way things work. And all the great scientists have said, like, you get down to that tiny, tiny place where everything is geometry. Everything is like relation in math, frequency. So the ancients, how do we observe that? Now, wonders how they created certain things in the past and how they knew certain things and why did they write these things down. Well, probably, and we know pretty much for sure by now that there were ancient civilizations long before us. I mean, Earth has been around for a really long time, and if you go back 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 years, I mean, we don't know what happened back then. I mean, who knows? You see, and the solar system, who knows what happened in the rest of the solar system? We know that there's probably big, huge surprises that we're going to find out in the solar system. In fact, I think they found them already, but that's another story. But the point is that science comes from observation, and it comes down to practicality. Can I build something with this? Can I repeat it? And the ancient science gets down to the can I repeat? Is there a repeatable science of metaphysical understanding, and starting with exploring our own soul and meditation? Because no matter what we perceive, if you're a jeweler and you want to cut this gem, you're going to spend some quiet time thinking, oh, how am I going to cut that gem? Because if I make a mistake, it's going to be a problem. So you think about it for a long time, you see? And science should be like that. Well, what are we doing here? I mean, there's all kinds of inventions that we can invent, right? We can invent terrible things. And they have been invented, but if we apply our mind, say, well, if I want to solve certain things, well, let's think about like what I can solve for beneficial purposes. You see, apply our mind to that, and if we understand that our genius, the consciousness that we're in, I mean, in a way, the ancients say that human being is almost like a god. Okay, think about it. For example, we manage animals, we manage cells, we're all manipulating the genes, and we're doing all this stuff and everything. And in a way, it is the way that the divine infinite consciousness is working on its own production. It's sort of like through us, through our activities, through the genius that unfolds through human beings and other creatures, then things happen. It's kind of like, and we get to participate. That's the important thing that we need to understand on a metaphysical level, that because we are semi-divine, we have the root of our awareness comes from a divine infinite source, and because of that, we can participate in a really eloquent and beautiful way to create, first of all, our own health and happiness, and then spread it around wherever. Because if you look at some of the great, beautiful art of the past and the statues and so many examples, people put a tremendous amount of beautiful attention into creating cathedrals or things in art, and like, wow, just imagine how the mindset of those people, that they just dedicate their whole life to make this incredibly beautiful construction. But in our modern life, a lot of that isn't done. We forgot how to build things. We forgot how to be creative. And music is a part of that. So I'm going to make these videos fairly short so they don't get boring. But I want to have a conversation. I really appreciate the feedback, because essentially we are all divine, basically, in every single person. You look at yourself in the mirror and say, what a magical thing that is. I don't care who you are. Look at yourself in the mirror and say, oh my God, I'm alive. I can do things with my hands, my eyes. So thanks again for listening, and I appreciate all the comments, and I listen to a lot of other content, and I'll make a lot more videos and explore some of the more details here, including this big fat book right here. So thanks again.